Turn that down. What's going on? What's going on? You already know what time it is. It's Thursday, aka Friday Junior. We had to adjust the schedule a little bit. We apologize about that. But hey, got to work with our guests. We got a hot one for you today. But before you get on and actually get some of this good information that we're going to go ahead and pass to you, please, if you are on YouTube, please go ahead and subscribe. Click that like button. Let's get these likes up. If you are on StreamYard, on Facebook, just click the link so we can actually see you in the chats, so we can actually interact with you and you can ask questions. But you already know how we get down. You either get right or you get left. So let's go ahead and get right. BirdCage is in the building. You already know.
Okay, y'all, this is it.
Lord, please let this thing right.
Okay, y'all, this is it.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. We have a special one for you tonight. We have Mr. Miles Garrett in the building. He's actually a reporter, not just for the Falcons, but for all of Georgia sports, from Yellow Jackets, better known as the Honeybees, the Hawks, the Braves, the Atlanta Dream, Georgia State, so many different sports venues that he covers. But we're blessed to have him on here with us tonight. So without further ado, I got to bring in my guys that's going to help me with the show tonight. You know, first off, got to bring my main man, Scoop, into the building. He was able to help set this up tonight. So we appreciate everything that you went through to get Mr. Garrett tonight. So how are you tonight, bro?
Blessed, man. Ready to get it started. We might get some insider information tonight.
That's the crazy part. We might get some insider information tonight. So you already know. Now we got to bring the oldest person onto the set with the beard that is gray. Our main man, Graybeard. What's going on, old timer?
I appreciate the sentiment, man.
Hey, if I get to live to be as old as you, I might be blessed, man. But right now, I'm still a young
42, bro.
but your beard make you look like you're 55.
Hey man, that combat, man, that combat experience. But man, hey man, how
Hey,
y'all feeling today, man?
you know what? I can't talk because if you look real close, you'll see some gray hairs up in there. But that come from walking on water with Lloyd.
Go ahead, bro. Go ahead, man.
Man,
good,
I had
I'm
to put
excited,
it
man.
in.
I'm excited, man. I'm excited about this interview, man. I really want to get some inside information about our beloved team, especially the Falcons, man. I can't wait.
Well, without further ado, we're gonna go ahead and bring on the man, the myth. He's gonna be a future legend, like Mr. Terrence Moore, Mr. Furman Bishop, one of the greatest reporters of Atlanta sports. But
Yeah.
until then, he's still working to get his name out there. Let's bring in Mr. Miles Garrett.
What's going on, fellas? I appreciate the very generous intro there. That's got some big shoes to fill here in the Atlanta market with the reporters we've had.
What's going on, Miles?
How's it going, fellas? That was a little bit mean to Graybeard there with that oldest member of the team intro.
Hey man,
we always give him grief when he comes on. Hey, you know how they always say you got to stay out of domestic disputes? That's a domestic dispute right there. I'm just messing with you. We got you on the inside, so you cover the Falcons, so you like family to us already. So we're good with that.
Love it.
Yes,
We're all part of the very small contingent, it seems, across the country of Falcons fans.
Oh yeah,
hey, man. Yeah. Everybody can't be perfect. And we just tell them you either get right or you get left, and it's about to be a whole bunch of folks getting left behind.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir.
They don't know yet.
We're gonna go ahead and start. Before we get to Falcon news, we're going to try to get a little bit of your backstory and your backdrop. Everybody in here is very excited to know who you are as not just the voice of Atlanta sports, but also the face of a new generation that's coming through. Like you said, you're stepping into some big shoes. From Furman Bishop to the great Bob Neal, who was there for years and he's enjoying retirement. And then you have, like we said, Mr. Terrence Moore, Steve Weish. The list goes on. I could go on all day. I read these guys when I was kids, but it's a blessing to be able to have someone of your caliber onto the show.
Yeah, no, again, extremely honored to be joining you guys and talking Atlanta, Georgia sports, specifically our Atlanta Falcons. But yeah, we've had some great reporters in our market, and certainly is an honor to sort of continue that legacy myself on the TV spectrum. And you mentioned a lot of good writers there.
Most definitely. So what we did for you tonight, because like we said, we always try to cater to our guests and make them feel at home. So what we did for you tonight, went ahead and got a picture of the new studio that's at Flowery Branch, was able to put that up for you so you can actually feel it in the comforts of being in the media home. So welcome.
Absolutely. We're really excited to be using that studio a lot this fall. It just opened up, I believe, right before the NFL draft. So it's still pretty fresh for all of us. So we're definitely excited to utilize that in the next few months.
Okay. So just to get started, I'm just going to ask a question before I pass it off to my guy, Scoop. So where are you from exactly? And when did you become involved with sports in your life?
Sure. So I'm born and raised in Georgia. I was spent the first few years of my life in Marietta. And then from about age 6 to 12, I'd say, I moved to Woodstock, and that's where I lived. And then after that, I moved to Alpharetta, went to high school at Milton my first 2 years. And then I went to Cambridge, which is a new school they built sort of close by because Milton got a little overcrowded. So I went to Cambridge, graduated from there in 2014, went to Elon University in North Carolina. But as far as sports is concerned, started off like most kids in Georgia wanting to play college football and, be a football star, like as any kid would, I feel like, who I grew up with. But I realized pretty quick I didn't have the talent for it. And I had a lot of concussions and head injuries that prevented me from maybe achieving that dream. So I figured what the next best thing is to stay involved with sports, because for me, it was always, a really cool feeling when you'd walk into a stadium and just feel the atmosphere of it. It was just a feeling I wanted to keep going for the rest of my life if I couldn't play on the field itself. So I figured, why not be a reporter? So I started getting into that about my senior year of high school. I started up a blog, and from there I went to school at Elon and got a journalism degree. I worked at the school newspaper, was a sports editor there. I did a lot of internships, worked with the Times News in Winston-Salem in Burlington area, interned with the Atlantic Coast Conference, interned with Fox 5, believe it or not, summer before my senior year, and I did sports anchoring there. And I graduated school. First job out of college was at WGXA News in Macon, Georgia. I was a sports and news reporter down there for about a year and a half. And then after that, I moved up to South Bend, Indiana, and covered Notre Dame athletics for 2 years in the middle of the pandemic, which was just a blast. But after that, came back down here to Atlanta, my home state, hometown, and been covering the Falcons ever since. So that was in about July, almost 2 years ago exactly from today. So happy to be back and happy covering the teams that I grew up watching.
So you said you were Elon alumni. I'm gonna kick it over to my man Graybeard next, and then my guy Scoop. Now, there's a gentleman that I met a while ago. I'm a fan, and I got to give them a shout out because they shout me out on the radio. Shout out to Dusty Dvorak and Mr. Danny Cannell on Sirius XM Radio Channel 84. You already know how they get down, but there's a gentleman who produces their show by the name of Mr. Ryan Ballard. I was able to meet him. He's Elon alumni, grew up around North Carolina. He's in DC right now. He works for Sirius Radio and also ESPN. I was wondering, have you ever come in contact with that gentleman? Good guy.
What'd you say, Ryan who?
Ballard. Ryan Ballard.
I don't think so. No, I the name doesn't ring a bell.
I think he might be a little older. I know I'm
Gotcha.
a little older than Ryan, but I was just kind of curious because
it's a very small school. So usually, if I went to school with them, I probably would know them, especially if they're in the journalism field.
So Ryan Ballard, I know you're watching this or whatnot, listening to it. So we did give Elon a shout out. Duke still sucks.
Go Phoenix.
Yeah, Duke still sucks though. He's a Duke fan, so I got
he's a Duke fan. Oh no,
horrible individual. I'm just joking, Ryan. But go ahead, Graybeard. You're up next, buddy.
Oh man! First of all, Miles Garrett, a pleasure to meet you, sir. I have a question for you. When you were coming up into your journalism field, did anybody mentor you, and who did you look up to in that field? Sure.
Yeah. When I first started getting interest in it, gentleman by the name of Paul Bird. Don't know if you guys are familiar with him. He works with Valley Sports, covering a lot of the Braves. Just won an Emmy, actually. But growing up, he was actually my baseball coach. So he was kind of a connection I already had, and I had mentioned it to him. And he was generous and kind enough to sort of take me along for sort of a shadowing experience back when I was in high school, which was a really cool thing. So that was definitely an experience I never will forget, just because it was just sort of my first taste of covering or being at that arena, being at Turner Field, being on the field with some of those guys. That was back in 2013, if I'm not mistaken. So about 10 years ago. But after that, as far as mentors are concerned, not necessarily anyone in the business. I do remember this very well. I remember when I was a senior in high school, I tweeted to Adam Schefter asking if he had any advice for someone who was trying to get into that field. And he was very kind enough to send me a DM privately saying, work hard, do this in school, do these internships, yada, 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 good luck. And that was always something I'll never forget, because he didn't have to do that. I mean, he's Adam Schefter. He's arguably the most trusted name in NFL news. So that was pretty cool of him to do back when I was a kid. In this business, probably my biggest mentor has been my former boss, Chip Zeller, who just retired about 13 days ago. So he's been at Fox 5 as the head producer since the late 70s. So he's been there for a very, very long time. Seen a lot of talent come and go, but ever since I interned there back in 2017, he sort of took me under his wing and really helped me out, and again, hired me in the first place. So he was someone who definitely helped me out.
Oh, man, good stuff. Got one more question for you. You said you covered in South Bend, which is Notre Dame. Can you give some people how's the atmosphere down there? I know I had a couple of people that I served with that are from South Bend who are just diehard Notre Dame fans, and yes, y'all still suck. But I just want to know, can you just give the fan a perspective of how that atmosphere and culture is?
Sure. Yeah. And I didn't get quite the full experience I wanted to because I got there sort of mid-season 2019, my first year there, and then the pandemic happened. So
Yeah.
the coverage and atmosphere was a little bit different because of the lack of fans. There wasn't everybody there like a normal Notre Dame football game would be. But that first season that I was there, it was pretty cool to see. I mean, you basically, your knowledge of Notre Dame is lore, it's Rudy, it's all those other things that you see on TV. But it was cool because, I was on the sideline every single game. I got to go to the big house for Notre Dame versus Michigan, which was really cool. It's definitely a different atmosphere than you see in the SEC. I've always said this. I think the SEC fans are more passionate. I think the fans up there are more traditional, if that makes any sense. I think it's more of we are Notre Dame. We're all about what Notre Dame stands for. And we're rowdy. Don't get me wrong. They are very rowdy fans. But I think the passion and energy is different because I noticed this specifically at Michigan because Michigan has the biggest stadium in college football. It seemed to be not as loud as I thought it should be for being the biggest stadium. Like I remember I've gone to so many Georgia games covering them, and Sanford Stadium's always rocking, and it feels super loud, and it feels like, you feel like you're a part of an energy. Whereas when I was you got the decoration right behind you. But whereas when I was at Michigan, it felt like something was missing. So that's probably, I think, what stems from the saying of the SEC. It means just a little bit more. So definitely was a cool experience to see. I basically lived a mile from the campus of Notre Dame. So, I was a part of that. That was my life for 2 years. I'm definitely very grateful for that experience.
Scoop, what you got for him?
All right, so me and Miles, we go back and forth on Twitter. So y'all make sure y'all follow Miles because I'm Coach Quay on Twitter, and Miles is a content creator. Believe me, like he comes with the heat on Twitter.
I do my best.
Miles, I'm gonna get down with it, man. I want to hear your most memorable experience as a sports reporter. And I know that you cover all sports, but let's get one outside of the Falcons, and then let's get one, you covering the Falcons. You got any stories to share with us?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the easiest example is the Braves World Series run, right? I mean, I was on the field at Truist Park for the Worlds. Like that was one of those moments where I was out there and I was like, I've made it, like this is what I always was trying to do. Like I'm on the field. I mean, it was already just crazy to be on the field for a Braves game nonetheless, but to be on the field and seeing Alex Rodriguez sitting at a desk a couple feet from me with David Ortiz and Joe Buck, John Smoltz, all the biggest names in sports, to be basically sharing an office space with them and being on the field holding a microphone while the eyes of the sports world are on this event. That's had to have been the coolest experience, especially growing up a huge Braves fan. I mean, and it obviously helped that they did win it. And unfortunately, I wasn't in Houston when they did win it. But it was an extremely cool experience. I mean, I got to go out to Los Angeles during the NLCS and be out there in the locker room talking to them when all that was going on, when they won, when they lost. Just an incredible experience. So I definitely say the World Series run was probably the coolest moment just because of the scale and what it was. Falcons related, it's going to sound so simple, but it probably just was one of my first training camps when I was first starting, just being out there, the fan in me was like, oh my God, like I'm just chatting with Matt Ryan. Like I grew up watching this guy, like, he's who Falcons football was for me for a long time. And, to be, just shooting the crap with him, to be like, oh, like, how's your wife doing? How's life doing? That was pretty cool just to talk casually with a person like that, after just watching it on TV for a long time. That I think that was a pretty cool moment watching the Falcons. anything else besides the Falcons, or like another Falcons related thing that isn't quite as boring as training camp, I would say it's kind of difficult to assess. Going to the NFL Combine this past year was a pretty cool experience for myself because it was probably where I did my best work because I was by myself. I had 3 cameras I brought with me by myself alone. I had no cameraman. I had set up everything. I had a bunch of live shots I had to do by myself, and we had a lot of breaking news. It was when Marcus Mariota got cut. It was when the not Jordan Davis, the Jalen Carter situation happened. Just a lot of news that I had to sort of do on my own, and sort of basically my responsibility to produce a lot of good content because I was the sole reporter in Indianapolis for. And I think it was when I sort of did some of my best work and sort of proved myself to a lot of Atlanta market people that, I am a serious reporter and can handle myself. But, outside of that, it was very cool to just be able to interview all these guys, Bryce Young, Bijan Robinson at the time, CJ Stroud, all those top prospects in that setting, because the NFL Combine is one of the coolest things you can do because you see the who's who of sports media reporters, and to be alongside them in that setting is very, very cool.
Okay. So I have a question for you. Now, you were saying that it was very interesting to be able to go to the NFL Combine and you're there seeing pretty much everybody's strengths and weaknesses in shorts and a t-shirt.
Mhm.
Now, during the season, what becomes very challenging for you as a sports reporter, a sports anchor, excuse me, I'm not going to call you a reporter because practically you're an anchor because you're everywhere and you have to hold it down. So I got to call you an anchor. So for you, what's one of the toughest things for you to do when it comes to being able to, you got to go to the game, you're there from the time the guys show up at the arena,
Mhm.
they ball out, you pretty much stay afterwards, get quotes, talk. Once you put everything together, you go to the studio, host, talk about it. And then you possibly can have another game going on the same night. And you have to just continuously work. What does it feel like? And I burning the candle on both ends doing that now. Me and my guy Graybeard in here are veterans. So we kind of have an idea what it's like to burn the candle as military vets. But what is it like burning the candle as a journalist and a sports reporter?
So is your question basically like what is it like to have all those responsibilities?
I would say not having the responsibilities because you have that as soon as you take the job.
Mhm.
What I'm saying is, what is it for you as an energy standpoint when it comes to, is it like being back in college where you're doing a 20-page paper and it's taking you all night to get that done and you're putting that type of energy into that? Or is it more like you have the energy to get that done and you just find time to sleep when you can?
Yeah, it's probably the latter, and it's definitely dependent on what event you're covering, because NFL Sundays are just an animal in and of itself, especially when you're there covering. Because usually, if I'm at the NFL game covering it, Falcons game specifically, I'll be on the sideline shooting it, so I'll be shooting the highlights, and then at halftime, you give the card of everything you shot to a reporter who will edit those highlights, send them back to make sure that we have for our show immediately that airs after the game on Fox. So you do that, then immediately after the game, you're shooting press conferences, you're running to the locker room to make sure you can get it as soon as the locker room opens up. Got to have your questions ready, and then immediately after that, you got to turn stories in, which will be, a minute and a half to 2.5 minutes of content that you need to churn out and create a story for. So it's honestly, the best way I describe it is it's a rush. I mean, you gotta be on your game. And I think a big part of our job is the pressure that you have because you're always fighting the clock. You always have to make a newscast. You always have to get stuff in time. I think one of the best examples of that is Friday Night Football, because Friday Night Football is so big in this state, and Fox 5 has got a huge show, High Five Sports, that has been the standard for high school football coverage, not only in Georgia, but I think the entire country. I'm very proud of our high school football coverage that we've had. Ken Rodriguez, Cody Chaffins were huge pioneers in making that show what it is. That being said, you're covering 2 games at a time, and those games usually start at 7:30. This show would start at 11 o'clock. So 7:30, you got to get at least 3, preferably 4 highlights that can be used for this show. And sometimes, you're at a game, you'll get something where you're like, that could be something. You'll get like a first down run where maybe he breaks some tackles, but it'll be 0-0 and you won't have any scores to work with. You got to know when the right time is to leave the game and go to the next game. And then when you're at that game, you got to make sure you can time your drive out, because sometimes you might be an hour away from the station. It'll be, 9:30 and you're really pushing it. So you got to get back to the station. You got to edit the highlights, and then you got to write the script in the prompter to read. And then you got to change into a suit, and then you got to apply makeup. It's a whole thing. And when you're in it, you got to be on your game, because if you're not, you're going to get called out quickly. And I think that's part of the business a lot of people don't realize. They see just the guy on TV who's reading the sports highlights. They don't realize that same guy had shot both of those highlights tonight, was sprinting with a 50-pound camera on his back, getting to the car, hustling, maybe making time to eat, who knows, getting back, editing said highlights, writing the script, making sure the score is correct, calling the school to ask to confirm if that score is correct, and then getting on air after changing into a suit. They don't see that part. They just see the finished product.
And that's mainly what a lot of people see, not just in your line of work. They also see it with podcasts as well.
Absolutely.
Because people don't realize that when you're creating content on a podcast, you actually have to do journalistic research. If you have a professional podcast, you have to also have quality content, and you have to have reliable, credible sources. Because if you get anything that's not credible, that is not good for you. And that is 100%. a bad day in the office.
Yeah.
And
no one will remember if you're first, but they'll remember if you're wrong.
Oh, yeah. Always. And I think the greatest example of that, going back to, and he's not a Falcons player, but he should be in the Hall of Fame. He's finally getting nominated for the senior class. He's up there, but he should have already been in. Mr. Jim Marshall, who played defensive end for the Minnesota Vikings.
Absolutely.
Everybody remembers the one play he had against the 49ers where he ran the wrong way and scored a safety, and he thought he scored a touchdown. And it was in the snow.
That's the play everyone remembers Jim Marshall for.
Yep. Everybody remembers that. And the sad part about it is Marshall was one of the most dominant defensive ends in the league.
He's fantastic.
For 20 years. For 20 years. You're talking about a guy that played for and never missed a game. And you look at all the collisions that guys are going that have now. And, you see guys, they got treatment. They're sitting on the side. Dude didn't miss a game.
Yeah.
And these guys they have rules that actually protect them more so than they were protected back in the day. So,
Absolutely.
like you said, they're going to always remember you for the one mistake you made. Sad.
Right. That's the nature of the game. That's how it goes. And maybe it's not fair, but that's how it is.
So now we talked about you being a jack of all trades, because you literally kind of touched on it, being a producer, a writer, analyst, and pretty much a sports anchor as well. You wear so many hats. We did that in the coast. We do that in the Coast Guard. Shout out to my Coast Guard.
Absolutely.
Got to wear many hats because we're smaller than the New York Police Department. But what is your overall goal career-wise? And we're gonna wrap up your interview with this before we jump into the Falcons. What is your overall career goal, and where do you want to end up eventually with your career?
Sure. And it's hard to sort of figure out, because I wouldn't be totally opposed to spending the rest of my career here at Fox 5 in Atlanta. Ideally, a dream scenario would be to be a national NFL reporter, to be an Adam Schefter type, or to be a guy on NFL Network or ESPN, something of that nature. But I've been treated very well at Fox 5, and my coworkers are fantastic. I consider Fox 5 to be the best local news station for sports in the entire country. No one else has the type of team that we have. As far as sheer numbers are concerned, I think our product reflects that. And it's certainly not lost on me how rare that is for sports stations in this, especially right now, with a lot of people cutting the cord and cutting the cable and just not many people watching local news anymore. So because of that, I am very happy with where I'm at Fox 5 and could see a long-term future there. But to answer your question, big goal-wise, probably, yeah, like an ESPN, like a Fox, doing something where I'm more of a national type reporter talking about the NFL for sure.
Well, now that we've gotten to know you a little bit, Mr. Garrett, let's go ahead and get to what we call our Dirtybirdz Topics.
All right, let's do it.
This is pretty much what we're going to talk about. We got 3 specific topics. We actually got a 4th one. We just didn't put in the commercial. We're going to bring that one on. We're going to brainstorm it on that one. Freestyle a little bit. But we have 3 topics that we're going to talk about tonight concerning the Falcons. The first topic that we're going to talk about is pretty much at this point, let's get to the fun topic. The NFL ends up trying to clown the Atlanta Falcons, but it ended up bad for them because they ended up removing the post for 28-3. Now, they were on their Twitter account. They find a way to clown all the time about the Falcons. It's bad when you have Patriots fans that are actually coming in and saying, hey, we already have the trophy. Leave them alone. They've already suffered enough. Let it go. It's been 6 years. Let it go. How do you feel about this one?
Well, I think it's basically, if I could best summarize it, it's the gentleman who chirped during the NFL draft, who announced the Falcons draft pick, who said, yeah, we've heard it already. It's just, I don't even think it really bothers people anymore at this point, the 28-3. It's become just such a overplayed joke now. It's just not even funny anymore. And I think that what we saw yesterday on the NFL feed was a beautiful example of that, because it was just all on bullying from everybody. It was hilarious to see all the Falcons fans. And like you said, not just Falcons fans, NFL fans, period, just being like, oh, this slow of a content day, huh? Where we're putting this type of stuff out. So no, it was pretty funny to see. And as you said, I mean, I think it's just a joke it's never going to be let down. Even if the Falcons, I think, do win a Super Bowl, I think this will always just be something that will be in the story of the NFL forever, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. But certainly if a Super Bowl is won, those chirps won't be as loud anymore.
We got to give a shout out to our guy, K-Dub, Killian Worthy, who normally is on the show with us. He's actually in the chat section tonight. And just like he said, it's very cliche to say 28-3. Scoop, how do you feel about this topic, man?
Man, me and Miles be on Twitter and just seeing it and seeing people repost and retweet. It just I don't know. You're searching for stuff. You're searching for content, but you post the entire game. Like, I understand clips, but you post the entire game. Yeah, that's a weak move by the NFL. I don't know who is a part of their content creation, but that was an epic fail yesterday.
Obviously enough to where they deleted it.
Correct.
I think that, when you talk about the NFL deleting that, a lot of other fan bases are looking at that, and yeah, people get interested in different kinds of news. But when you have other people, especially the team that beat the Falcons, their fans stepping out and saying something, you don't want to lose ground when it comes to having individuals who literally put food on your table. That's how I look at it. But Graybeard, what you got?
Man, I'm tired of it. Just what it is. I'm tired of. I get it, man. 28-3. We ain't gonna never live it down. Unfortunately gonna be a part of the team history pretty much forever. And like Miles said, man, we can win a Super Bowl and somebody will still bring it up. Remember 28-3? We get it. Let it go. Move on.
Amen.
So that's what I feel about it.
And it hurts. Like, still to this day, I've made my peace with it, but it still hurts as a fan. And for once, I can honestly say that we don't know what it feels like, but we know we know that Raider fans still to this day, there's a few calls that they had to go against their way, and they still are salty about it right now. Former Falcon, former first round Falcons pick Lincoln Kennedy, who played for us and eventually had a great career with the Raiders as well. He's still pissed about Tom Brady in the tuck rule, still to this day. And he actually said when the Falcons lost, he said, I pulled for my former team to win, and he said they literally let me down. But during it, he said he'll probably to this day, he said he's gonna carry that anger to the grave with him about Tom Brady.
No doubt.
So
man, it's untouchable.
But man, it's just different. It's just really different when you just look at how everybody markets it. I look at it like this: we might as well turn that into a holiday and make fun of it.
Yeah.
If they're gonna make fun of us, let's roll with it. Let's go
what's
ahead.
Funny? I've always said this adage to especially I feel like it rolls with bullying. If you show that it doesn't bother you anymore, suddenly they'll stop making the joke.
Mm-hmm.
If you just lean into it, then suddenly it's not as fun to poke that bear anymore.
Here's a crazy thought. If the Falcons win the Super Bowl and they have a large, when I say a large margin of victory with that Super Bowl, I can honestly say I think all the 28-3 jokes go away.
It's got to be a pretty dominant team, I think.
If you go in there and beat somebody down, literally beat them down like they owe you money.
Especially if it's the Patriots somehow, if there's a cool rematch of that, then it'd be pretty cool.
We got to beat them down like Georgia TCU, man. That's the only way.
That's the only way. I mean, that's the only way, And speaking of beat downs or whatnot, right now, NFL defenses could actually possibly take a beat down from our running backs this year coming up. We have a possibility of having 2 1,000-yard backs. How do you feel about having a backfield where you got 2 guys that could possibly get it, whether it's 1,000 yards rushing, 1,000 yards rushing and receiving, where it's a mixture? But how do you feel that this dynamic is actually going to help out with the Falcons this year?
I think it's brilliant. I mean, there's a reason why Bijan Robinson was picked at number 7. There's a lot of arguments that you can make that, the team should have taken another type of player, maybe a defensive player. But there's no denying that Bijan Robinson was the most talented player available at pick number, I believe it was 8, pick number 8 for this past NFL draft. And you look at what was done last year with Tyler Algier, a late round pick, rushes for as many yards as he does. You already have a lot of success with Cordell Patterson, even Caleb Huntley to a certain extent. Avery Williams even did some things there in the backfield. So you add a 2-headed monster like that. I mean, we've seen it before. We've seen the Falcons be at their best when they've had a threat in the backfield. Devontae Freeman and Tevin Coleman. They had a 2-headed monster in the backfield to get to the Super Bowl. TJ Duckett and Warwick Dunn that you saw in 2004 when they made it to the NFC Championship game against the Eagles. Maybe could have done more, but you see teams have the most success, in my opinion, when you have a balanced attack, when your run game can be just as threatening as your passing game. And with the type of offense that Arthur Smith runs, where it is very run-centric, very focused on the play action, and not only that, focus on the offensive weaponry of players rather than the specific position of them. I think you're going to see a lot more receiving yards out of Bijan Robinson than a lot of people might think. I think there's going to be more of that rather than 1,000 yards rushing, which he very well might. I'm not putting that past him, but I think it may be along the lines more of a 600 yards to 700 yards rushing and 600 to 700 yards receiving type thing, to where it adds up more on that spectrum. Again, not putting it past him because he's an extremely talented running back, and Arthur Smith knows how to use running backs, and especially behind an offensive line that's built for a great rushing attack. I think the sky's the limit for this offense.
Well, I know you were saying that the sky's the limit for the rushing attack, but we have a question for you. My guy knows where I'm going with this. That's why he's already looking down. Like I said, we have a redemption season for our former first-round pick, Mr. Kyle Pitts. He's expected to play well. Now, the thing that we're also thinking about is Jonnu Smith coming in. That was Arthur Smith's first Cordell Patterson.
Yep.
And when you look at how Jonnu Smith was used, end arounds, passing game for him to go receiving, he could also throw the football too. So I mean, when you look at having such a versatile, you know what? I'm just gonna call Jonnu Smith the lethal weapon. He is. I would have to say he's like the Martin Riggs of this offense. He does so many different things. If anybody remembers the old movie Lethal Weapon, Mel
Fantastic.
Gibson compared to Martin Riggs or whatnot, he reminds you a little bit of Martin Riggs because he brings so much to the table.
I like that.
So I think he would be the lethal weapon since everybody wants to call Mr. Pitts the unicorn. That's the lethal weapon. That's how I see it.
It's a good nickname.
So what do you think that he's going to bring to that tight end room? And do you think that he's going to push Kyle Pitts to become a better player in our offense, or do you think he's going to take his spot? Honestly.
No, I think it'll make it better because, I mean, let's look back at what the offense was when Kyle Pitts was at full strength, right? You got to go back to his rookie year, 2021. At that point, for most of the season at least, you had no Calvin Ridley. Your number one wide receiver was arguably Olamide Zaccheaus. So if you look at it that way, you're basically the only offensive weapon on the field outside of Cordell Patterson at that point. So you put that same player who, mind you, had the greatest rookie tight end season of all time, debatably. You put him into an offense with an already Pro Bowl tight end, a rookie receiver who has very obvious chemistry with the new quarterback and showed a lot of promise his last 4 games. You add a rushing attack that's already at the top of the NFL, which just added the most talented player at the position who, yes, also will be put in the slot quite a bit. I think that if there's any regression from Kyle Pitts, something went horribly wrong because Kyle Pitts, yes, should still be, in my opinion, the top receiving target, even ahead of Drake London in this offense, just because of his talent and skill set. Again, I think he's in the best possible situation, the best situation he's been in since he's been a Falcon. And I think you can say that for everybody on the roster just because of how it is currently constructed and what it's been the last 2 years with the instability and sort of, you know, placeholder type players that have been there for a while. I think that Kyle Pitts is primed for a fantastic season if his injury isn't still bugging him, because I think the biggest thing or the biggest indicator, I think, for how talented and how impressive Kyle Pitts can be now is looking at Drake London's stat line with Desmond Ridder versus what it was with Marcus Mariota. It's like 2 different players. You know, it's the stat line. I mean, that's literally all you have to look at. Like, we watched it, we saw how obvious it was. But just looking at the stat line, it's crazy how much more targets Drake London got. And it makes you think, how much more could we have seen from, like, could Drake London have had a Kyle Pitts type rookie season, if Desmond had been his quarterback, or if there was if Matt Ryan was his quarterback, for instance, the same type of thing that Kyle Pitts got to have his rookie year. So I think, long-winded answer short, I think Kyle Pitts is primed for a very good season. And no, I don't think that Jonnu Smith will be taking reps for him. And if anything, I think it'll just enhance it because guess what? That's another guy you got to cover and account for now.
Yep, because New England didn't use him right, because if you go back and look at his Tennessee Titans footage or whatnot, he literally was the Cordell Patterson for the Tennessee Titans.
Yes.
And it opened up so much for Derrick Henry. But if you've noticed, since he left Tennessee, what have you been seeing Derrick Henry take a lot more of? A lot more punishment.
I think the funny thing about Tennessee, I think the biggest Arthur Smith indicator is what happened to Ryan Tannehill when Arthur Smith left. Because when Ryan Tannehill got to Tennessee, Arthur Smith was there. Suddenly Ryan Tannehill becomes this top 10 quarterback, arguably. At that point, he had 2 seasons with Arthur Smith where he was debatably a top 10 on the bottom end of that quarterback, where he was maybe you'd consider the 10 to 12 range of a quarterback. As soon as Arthur Smith left, he's kind of become irrelevant again. He's sort of become that Ryan Tannehill that sort of flamed out in Miami. So I think that's a huge indicator of the Arthur Smith effect from leaving a place to now where he is, to show you just how much of an impact Arthur Smith can have on a quarterback and an entire offense for that matter.
It makes a lot of sense on that one. Scoop.
So Miles, the Kyle Pitts reference is just a jab at me. I'm the only one out of the group that's supporting Kyle Pitts. Yeah, that's all it is. But I will say this: I'm glad that you are vouching for the same sentiment that I'm saying as well. Now that you have a better quarterback at hand, like I think that the relationship between Drake and Desmond is relevant, but you cannot dismiss the fact that Desmond came in the last 4 games and did not have Pitts out there.
Yeah.
So you know that he's going to get his targets, and I think
who else was he throwing to outside of Drake? I mean, he had Olamide Zaccheaus, but I think on most good teams, Olamide Zaccheaus is at best a number 3.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's gonna open up the offense to have him out there. Like I don't have anything against Jonnu Smith, but Jonnu Smith is a talent. But Jonnu Smith, most receiving yards in his career was probably like 450 yards.
Yeah, probably.
So here we are.
Well, remember this think about this: when you got a 2,000-yard rusher and Derrick Henry in your backfield, that really is practically unstoppable in that system that Arthur Smith had. You're not gonna throw the ball that much.
You don't need to.
Yeah, when you got a guy that's literally a defensive end running the football.
Yeah.
What more do you need?
It's the Herschel Walker strategy. Herschel to the left, Herschel to the right, Herschel over the top. You know it's coming and it's gonna work.
But the thing is, we lack physicality coming from the tight end position. Now, you said he had the greatest tight end season. That's actually inaccurate. Mike
for
Ditka
a rookie. I meant for a rookie. It was
No,
I know Ditka did very well, but
even Mike Ditka. I was gonna wait till you got that up.
Yes.
Mike Ditka actually had that. We actually will put. I ain't gonna lie to you. It would have been nice to see him break that record because with all the bad stuff that's been going on in Atlanta, we need some positivity. Absolutely. So that would have brought a lot of positive vibes to the Falcons. Now, we wanted to know about the quarterback. My man Graybeard, we're all Ritter fans of him, but he literally is the best when it comes to asking questions about Ritter because he sees it from a different point of view. So I gotta let my man Graybeard take over the floor for this.
All right, so Miles, you don't heard the rhetoric that we don't heard about Desmond Ritter. We already hear rumors about Trey Lance. We trying to acquire him or whatnot. And for you, who probably don't seen Desmond up close more than anybody, especially with minicamp or whatever, let the fans know what do you see about Desmond Ritter that you feel positive that he can lead us not only for this season but for future seasons and further on in his career.
I think the big thing with Desmond, it's very layered, I think, when it comes to Desmond Ritter. I think a lot of fans obviously wanted to see him play a lot earlier than he did and use that as an indicator that maybe he isn't the guy because he couldn't beat out Marcus Mariota for the longest time. I think it's a different argument after seeing how Arthur Smith and Terry Fontenot have liked to develop their players. I think it's been part of their plan because of Arthur Smith's schematics. It's a complicated system to learn. There's a reason why it works very well. There's a lot of formation changes. There's a lot of things that the quarterback needs to be aware of. That's the reason Marcus Mariota was brought in the first place, because he was familiar with Arthur Smith's scheme. It's a very complex scheme to learn. That being said, I think it was very important for Desmond to sit and actually take all this in without the pressure of being thrown out there and having to, maybe get your confidence shot a little bit. Instead, what did we see? We saw 4 games of steady improvement every single time. And you can make the argument that the competition maybe wasn't as good at the end with Tampa Bay resting their starters, but what would you have wanted him to do? Would you have wanted him to not have a better game? Because he did have a better game. So you have your first game in the Louisiana Superdome, one of the hardest environments in all of the NFL. And you can make a pretty good argument the Falcons would have won that game if Drake London didn't fumble the pass that he made on 4th down. It was an extremely clutch throw for anybody, nonetheless, a rookie making his first start. So you have that game. The Ravens game, he performs relatively well. Extremely cold environment, passing probably not your best option. I was talking to our sports producer, Victor, who was on the field. He was telling me how cold the elements were. This is what I believe that was his second start. It may have been his third start. I'm not quite sure. That was his second start.
Mm-hmm.
And the third one was Arizona, correct?
Yep.
Arizona. Okay. And you have a team finally where you're able to kind of take the pressure off a little bit. I think at that point, the playoffs were out of the question. The pressure is not as strong to make that quote unquote playoff push. And what does he do? He wins you a game. Does the same thing in Tampa Bay where he wins you the game. Again, Tom Brady plays only a quarter, but he wins you the game. So I think he did the best with what he could do at that point. And again, keep in mind, you've said it already. No Kyle Pitts, Drake London, Olamide Zaccheaus there. You have a pretty good running back to fall back on in Tyler Algier. Cordell Patterson sort of took his bumps at the end there. Caleb Huntley out with an Achilles injury. So again, depleted roster off the top for a rookie quarterback. Now, you take this into a full offseason. The Falcons have said adamantly and frequently, he is our guy. There's been no question. I think it's been the funniest thing this offseason of like, oh, the Falcons are all in on Lamar Jackson. They're trying to get Lamar Jackson. They're going after Lamar Jackson. There had never been one confirmed report about any interest in Lamar Jackson whatsoever. And I bring it back to Deshaun Watson, because when Deshaun Watson happened, there were confirmed reports of interest. So that was a different story. With Lamar Jackson, it was a completely different story. So because of that, because of what his teammates are saying about him, because of what the coaches are saying about him, what the expectations are, especially his leadership. And I take it as an example because I've seen it, and it might be an extreme example because he's one of the greatest players in team history. I do see a lot of Matt Ryan in Desmond Ridder in that he is not afraid to take command at a very young age and assume that leadership role. And he can get fiery if he needs to be. I think that was a thing that people lost a lot on Matt Ryan, and that he can be fiery and he can show his team that, hey, follow me, I can get you guys this win. Matt did that especially a lot in his rookie season. And I anticipate seeing a little bit of that from Desmond this next season. But I think a full offseason of being the starting quarterback was extremely important for him. He put up a lot of weight this offseason, muscle-wise, which was very impressive to see because he was a little bit skinny last year. And I think that's an important thing to consider too, because he's going to take hits, but he needs to get back up. So, another long answer to your question. I'm expecting big things out of Desmond, and I like how he's been developed so far.
I mean, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think people have to realize that last year, Desmond Ridder only had 4 games.
Yes.
You can't judge somebody off 4 games.
No.
I mean, it's not enough body of work. And like you said, during the offseason, he worked. You've seen the progression he got. I mean, you've seen like our guy Grady goes on TV talking about his confidence. How he's gaining the locker room, which is super important to leading the team. So I'm with you. I just can't wait to see what he does in week 1.
And an argument I've said a lot about Desmond Ridder too, playing devil's advocate. Again, I believe Desmond will be very good, and I think they made the right decision to go forward with him this season. But for the Falcons fans who are not sold on Desmond Ridder and are worried, what if he doesn't pan out? And this is a roster that, seems to be on the up. You've got a lot of talent on the offense. My argument to that is Desmond's on a rookie deal. You're not paying him a lot of money. And say he doesn't perform the way you want and he regresses. Again, doubt this happens. I don't think it will happen. But if it does, say you find out this season that Desmond's not going to be the guy, you can go after your quarterback next year. You can find him and put your eggs in that basket because now you've got a good roster to work with. You have the cap space. You can trade up to get a Caleb Williams or a Drake May or a guy like that if you really want to get him. And, if that's the route you want to take, because at that point, if you're trying to trade up to get the quarterback, that rookie quarterback's going to come in with Bijan Robinson, with Drake London, with Kyle Pitts, with one of the best offensive lines in the league. Like, what a situation for a potential quarterback. So to backtrack, I think Desmond is going to flourish in this offense. But for the Falcons fans who don't think so, you don't have much to lose.
So, Miles, you're saying that we're playing with house money?
I think so.
And Miles, here's the other thing that you're saying one of the best offensive lines. We have one of the best running offensive
lines, correct.
Yeah, not passing.
Yes.
Because truthfully, we watched Mariota run for his life last year. Now, Mariota wasn't that great, but still, he was still running for his life.
I will argue this point, but to interrupt you very quickly. I think Desmond was a lot better than Marcus, and to an extent, Matt Ryan, at stepping up in the pocket and using his mobility to keep his eyes downfield. Because a lot of what we saw with Marcus was roll out, first read isn't open. Okay, I'm running. Whereas Matt Ryan was different because he'd step back. Admittedly, Matt couldn't move at all. So, Matt's trying to find his reads, and he'll probably get it there if he's got time. But a lot of time, Matt Ryan didn't have that time. I think Desmond was very, very good, especially for being a rookie, at getting the snap, taking the pressure, stepping up in the pocket, staying around. Because Desmond can move if he wants to. Exactly. I think Desmond was very good at staying within the pocket and not going outside and kind of doing that Marcus Mariota thing where he's kind of like, oh, first read isn't there, time to like see what I can do and maybe panic a little bit. I think Desmond was very good at that.
Well, Desmond also has an element to his game that Matt didn't have. He actually can move. He can actually run if he has to. Like a lot of people are saying, oh, he's not that quick. But I'm like, y'all don't realize that he's a lot quicker than you think.
Yes.
It might
at the end of the day, it's not the quarterback's job to be a runner. Like, it's not your job is to find the receivers.
Yep. You get the ball to your playmakers. And hands down, when you look at what Ritter, as you said, Ritter has been in the system at Cincinnati when he was there. He had playmakers. Mm-hmm. Some of those guys were 3 2-star guys, but they were good enough to figure out how to play together and actually win ball games because they rarely lost games with Cincinnati. And the thing that put most people that said the game that put Ritter on the map is when he knocked off Notre Dame. But anybody that is a college football fan knew about Desmond Ritter from the jump because on draft night, we were in another group at the time, and I actually was the one who called it out. I said, they're either going to draft Ritter or they're going to draft my guy that came out of Ole Miss. Matt Corral. I said, they're either going to draft either one of those guys. Now, I said, you take a chance on Corral because he's already been hurt. So with him being hurt, it's like buying a used car. You're getting Desmond Ritter, it's like buying a brand new car, getting a brand new car off the lot for quiet, good gas mileage, pretty much low maintenance when it comes to being fixed. And when you really look at what Ritter brings to the table, as you said, he's a fiery guy. But also, Ritter had a little bit of a different mind state than anybody else coming in.
Yes.
Ritter has a family. That man has a daughter, and he has a fiance he's about to marry. So if he hadn't already married. But just being honest, like we said, the maturity factor was already there before he got here. When you get a lot of guys that come to Atlanta, and you're talking about young guys that finally get out of the college structure, you have freedom. And with all the distractions that are around Atlanta or whatnot, it's easy to take your focus off of being a ball player and being a professional. Ritter came in with a mindset of, I have a child car seat in the back of my car. I got to feed my daughter. So his mindset was a little different than a lot of the rookies that will be coming into Atlanta.
Definitely. And that's a maturity that you definitely want to have, especially at that position at the quarterback. But to sort of speak to that point a little bit, I think it's become so evident now after covering this team the last few years that Terry Fontenot and Arthur Smith have a type. And it's very much all about culture. They are very bought in on getting players who fit the culture that they want in this building. And it's very evident. Like when I interviewed Bijan Robinson at the Combine, I saw that. After talking to the other players on the Falcons team, it was very evident after the fact, being like, oh, this is going to be a seamless transition to have a guy like Bijan come into that locker room. He's just very much a guy that fits the mold of what they look for. And speaking to Terry Fontenot, he would always talk about that. I've interviewed Terry multiple times where he talks about culture, and culture being something, a foundation that, you know, you want guys to want to come to Atlanta. Calais Campbell was a prime example of that. Calais Campbell could have gone to a contender if he really wanted to. But what did he do? He came to Atlanta. And why did he come to Atlanta? A big reason, Desmond Ridder. So I think all those things are very important to consider when you look at the potential success of this team.
Now, you mentioned Ridder, but there's another piece that comes out when you talk about Ryan Nielsen. That man has had a top 10 defense from the time he stepped foot into the defensive coordinator spot in New Orleans, even though they were already stacked. He kept it going. He literally kept it going. And you look at how Atlanta's being built right now defensively, we're in a situation to where we can actually build on that, and them bringing in veterans to help out these young guys, I think, is a benefit. And for me, you know, the defensive side of the ball to me is the most important because that's been lacking. Everybody's been talking about the offense for the longest, but the defense has been a problem for years, you know, and that's the reason why we've lost so many games. That was the reason why we had the Atlanta curses, they would say. And I don't think it's a curse. You just couldn't stop anybody offensively because we weren't good enough. Point blank, period. But how do you feel Jesse Bates, Calais Campbell, David Onyemata are going to really balance out this defense from the free agency side of things?
Yeah, I mean, off the bat, David Onyemata, I mean, Grady, we've been looking for a guy to be alongside Grady Jarrett for years. Grady Jarrett has not played with another defensive tackle that's had the talent and capability and resume of a guy like David Onyemata to just pair him up and take another body off of Grady, because as we all well know, Grady is double teamed all the time and still manages to be productive. So excited to see what can happen now that he has a established running mate next to him. And I think Jesse Bates is somebody who, you know, it's been a long time since you've had talent in that secondary outside of AJ Terrell, because you had Keanu Neal, who outside of his rookie and maybe second season had the promise, but he dealt with the injury bug and maybe wasn't the best in coverage that you wanted him to be. Jesse Bates brings that, because the Falcons have always seemingly had some issues at secondary, whether it's guys that, you know, would show promise but maybe not quite get there. Robert Alford immediately comes to mind, you know, a guy that would have a game where you're like, oh, yes, he's finally putting it together. And then the next game he has 3 pass interference calls that are causing issues. He's getting beat. You know, that it was the Robert Alford experience. That's kind of what would happen, you know. And then you'd always have Desmond Trufant, who would show cornerback 1 potential and look really good. And then, you know, he'd have an injury. He'd have a hamstring issue. It was just all about consistency, I think, in the secondary that would be a problem for a long time. And William Moore, it almost felt like his prime was a little too short. It seemed like he had some potential. Thomas Deku, another guy, Lawyer Malloy back in the mid-2000s. But it's been a long time since there's been solid consistency in that secondary. And adding a guy like
comes to mind.
What's that?
Brent Grimes comes to mind.
Brent Grimes, absolutely. A guy that was just he showed promise, and he was little, and he almost played above to what his body could do sometimes. But yeah, no, it's been a long time. And then you see the guys in the secondary now outside of AJ Terrell, bringing in Jeff Okudah. You know, you obviously wanted to see Casey Hayward be a little bit more than what he was. Unfortunately, injuries just, I think, took their toll on Casey. But I think depth is a big thing. I think it's not only who they've added, it's the fact that you've got guys ready to go if another guy goes down. If Richie Grant goes down, you've got Jalen Hawkins to get in there. If Jesse Bates goes down, the same thing. If Jeff Okudah goes down, Mike Hughes can go in there. Cornell Armstrong can go in there. You're not going to have a situation where Cornell Armstrong is covering Jamar Chase against the Bengals like we saw, you know, and you felt so bad for the man, because it's just like, look, do your best. Like we know what the situation is. Like, it's Jamar Chase, and you were on the practice squad a week ago, you know, like it's one of those things where outside of a miracle, we understand what's going to happen. But all these free agency acquisitions, the way they built the team, I think have set this team up for success purely from a depth perspective.
and let's and one of our guys, Brent Gaylor, we talk about Pat. He's an old offensive coordinator because he coached college and high school, and he played college ball. We talked about the pass rush being something that was heavy because now you have Grady with a little bit more help. When you talk about Bud Dupree coming in, you're talking about Eddie Goldman coming out of retirement. You know, he retired for 1 year. Maybe that was to get his body right. Who knows? But he comes back. Then you look at Taquan Graham's going to be coming back off that knee injury. And you have so much depth. And the way that the Saints were so good, I'm sorry. Let me rephrase that. The way that those bagheads were, you had depth. You had depth on their defensive line, and they had consistent rotation of fresh bodies. This is something the Falcons haven't done since Jerry Glanville was the defensive coordinator running the Grits Blitz defense. Now we have that now.
Well, I think it's going to be interesting because I think training camp is going to be super interesting, especially on the defensive side, because you've got a lot of bodies that aren't going to be making this team. Like, you talk about all those guys, Taquan Graham, Grady Jarrett, David Onyemata, Caden Ellis, Ade Ogundeji, who is 2 years removed from having a pretty decent rookie season. You've got Arnold Ebiketie, D'Angelo Malone. You've got Bud Dupree, Troy Anderson. Like, there's a multitude of relatively talented and young bodies, Lorenzo Carter, who are there that you may not just have space for. Like, it's weird. It's almost like Ade Ogundeji seems like the odd man out right now just because of all the other guys they've added. And we're talking about a guy who rookie year looked like he had promise. He kind of looked like he took a step back last year, but there's a lot of guys on this roster who may end up getting cut surprisingly just because of the amount of guys they have right now.
Scoop, what you got?
Man, Miles, every time I hear Ade Ogundeji, I get like, I be feeling some type of way because every time I hear his name, I think about him knifing in, and then the play is coming back the same way he was supposed to been keeping outside containment. It just frustrates me. But I digress. So as far as the inside linebacker room, how do you feel about the inside linebacker room? Because I think that when you name all those guys, I think that we're deeper on the defensive line now. I think that we're deeper on the edge now. I think we're deeper in the secondary. But I think something about that inside linebacker room that has kind of it looks thin as far as I'm concerned. How do you feel?
Yeah, I mean, a big part of it, I think, has to do with who they've added. I do have a lot of faith in Troy Anderson. I think he finished the season strong, sort of like Desmond Ridder. I think they were guys that were added into the starting lineup, you know, maybe a little later than most fans hoped for. But I'm anticipating a big season out of Troy Anderson. I think there was a reason why he was picked so high is because of his ceiling, just because of his size. I believe he's 6'5", had the fastest 40 run of any linebacker in his class. It's funny. I think a lot of Dog fans love to compare the Troy Anderson versus Nakobe Dean aspect because both are on the board. But if you look at how they each did last year, you could argue Troy Anderson was better with less reps than Nakobe Dean. So I'm not saying Troy Anderson will be better. I'm not saying each player, one's better than the other. But what I'm saying is I think there's no doubt that Troy Anderson's ceiling is a lot higher than Nakobe Dean just because of the talent that he has. And I think that's why the Falcons picked him, is because of his speed. I think it's a big part of what Ryan Nielsen's scheme is going to be, is having a linebacker like Troy Anderson who can go field to field, sideline to sideline, and make those plays. Because as a rookie, yes, he might have missed some plays, but he was always involved in them. And that was something that I like to see out of a rookie. You know, maybe you're not making the play, but you're there. You know, that's just development at that point. So I have a lot of faith in Troy Anderson. Michael Walker is a guy who I see as the outside looking in, who might need to prove something this year, because he was another guy like Ade, I think, who 2 years ago showed some promise. You know, you're thinking maybe he could be another Deion Jones type player. He sort of has that same build, same mold. And then last year, a little bit of a regression. So I'd like to see a little bit more out of him this year, because, you know, he could be a guy who's a threat to be cut. So all those guys considered, maybe it'd be cool. I believe Caden Ellis is a middle linebacker. I'm not quite sure.
He
I'd
plays
like
a little. He plays
Yeah,
a little outside. He plays more outside linebacker, but he's had reps at that Mike linebacker, being a middle linebacker. But
In this
not
defense, he would to be in the inside.
Yeah, so
But-
I've heard a lot of good things about Caden Ellis. There's a reason why Ryan Nielsen probably recommended bringing in a guy like him to anchor his defense. We'll probably see a lot because just of familiarity purposes. So yeah, I mean, Caden Ellis and Troy Anderson are two guys I'm very excited to see.
But I kind of gotta backtrack on one comment that you made about Nakobe Dean. Is just, and it's not me being, it's just me being realistic
Before you say that, I'm going to preface this by saying I thought Nakobe Dean deserved to be a first-round pick. Continue.
Of course. Well, I mean, we already know why it was the shoulder that kept him out of it, but Philly took a chance on him. But it's something that you can't coach with Nakobe Dean.
100%.
A lot of people, and here's the thing. Tom Landry said the same thing, and he had a chance to get Mike Singletary back in the day. Nakobe Dean has a lot of Mike Singletary and Sam Mills in it. And when 100%. I say it's an attitude that he brings to the table, that's something that you can't coach. When you have guys that can look into your eyes, and you're a young guy, like I live here in Philly, I can tell you just like this here, from what we've heard, even though he didn't get much playing time because they had vets playing and he was learning the system, they've already said that this dude is going to get more reps this year and he's actually going to be on the field making plays because he's a guy that goes from sideline to sideline, but the difference is he can also cover in the pass really well. He's fast and he's a smart guy. How can I say it? The man was an engineering major. Now, we all know this. We've been to college, and it's rough. Now, you're talking about someone who is an engineering major and graduated with a 4.0 on top of running a Kirby Smart defense. He's doing it as a young guy.
Smarter than me.
And here's the thing. People don't really realize how complex that defense is because a lot of former Alabama players that played for Kirby, a lot of guys that played at Georgia, everybody has said you cannot be a dummy running that defense at all. And when you bring in that, you gotta look at the intelligence side of it because it's easy to have somebody to make bring the physical attributes to the table. But can you mentally adjust to the game? We have to see that with Troy Anderson because remember, Troy only played 1 year linebacker in college. He was literally a Swiss Army knife all the way around. And last year was his first year playing linebacker, period, in the NFL. So I think he's going to grow. Like you said, he does have potential to get great, but you got a guy that's been playing linebacker his whole life, and he played a little running back. So it's a bit of a difference when you talk about the learning curve because that's going to be huge in the NFL. So I think we got to steal physically, but we've got to hope that he mentally adjusts a little bit faster and just is able to contribute to this defense because that Ryan Nielsen's defense is an attack style defense, 100%. And you have to be able to be smart on that one. But here's another question I got for you because we're not going to keep you because we kept you long enough. How do you feel about now? We all talk about the special teams unit on this team. I always put that out here because special teams is a huge piece of the game that it's starting to become cut out now because of the rules that we have.
Yes.
But now that Avery Williams has gone down and he's going to be gone for the year, when it comes to replacing an Avery Williams who actually helped the offense get great field position from his returns, averaging over 13 yards of return, which is really good for a return man. Do you think that we're going to use Scotty Miller or we're going to use one of our reserve speed guys on this team to pretty much be on the hands team where they can actually contribute to trying to set up good field position?
Now, are you talking punt return, kickoff return, or everything?
Because Avery Williams did both. That's what I'm saying, both.
Yes. No, I will say I think some Falcons fans should keep their eye on Bijan Robinson for one of these roles because Bijan Robinson was taking some reps at punt return for this team in minicamp, along with some of the other cats they got back there. Now, Scotty Miller's got the speed. There's no denying that. I think he would be a good person to have back there. I think it would be incredible to see Bijan Robinson taking some punts back there. Obviously, you don't want to put his safety at risk because he's a very valuable asset, very valuable player, and important for this offense. And honestly, you'd love to see Cordero Patterson try the punt returns too. I know he's more of the kickoff guy, and kick returns have sort of become a lost art per se. But I do think that they have the guys to maybe do it, and some talented guys at that. So again, would not be surprised to see Bijan back there a couple times.
I think all of us wouldn't mind seeing Cordell back there because he made his bones at Tennessee, New England, around the league with a punt returner. So
he's the greatest kickoff returner of all time.
Yep. I was gonna say we've had two of them. We had Devin Hester first, now we got this guy.
And guess who we had way earlier before that?
Eric Metcalf was another one.
I was gonna say Deion Sanders, but that
Prime time. Yep. Prime was a great return man for us too.
Eric Weems was pretty good too. Don't sleep on him.
But those in the building.
Alan Rossum. Yeah, they've always had pretty good kick returners.
Alan, I'm gonna do you a favor.
Tim Dwight was pretty good too.
Yeah.
See, you mentioned, and here's the thing, and we actually have one of those returners that was forgotten. Mr. Billy White Shoes Johnson will be coming into the BirdCage on the 27th of this month. So that is the punt returner that was forgotten. And that man, he could dance. He and everybody remembers him from his end zone play, but he was that guy. Billy was that guy. But what I'm going to do for you, since you did mention Allen Rossum and you mentioned a couple of outside of the poster that I'm gonna make for you that I got, I also made a poster for all the great returners that the Falcons have had in their history, from Tim Dwight, Allen Rossum, Devin Hester, Prime, Eric Weems is on there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to gift that to you for saying thank you for coming on to the show. So that's a bonus with the poster that we've created for you.
That's awesome, guys. That's awesome. Thank you so much.
So we definitely appreciate you coming through and taking time out of your busy schedule. We definitely would like to have you to come back during the season because we want to hear some inside scoops, of course. But we definitely enjoy how you've broken things down and you brought a lot to the table for us.
Hey guys, happy to do it. It was a pleasure. Definitely looking forward to doing it again with you guys.
Most definitely. I'll link up with you afterwards. You already know the routine, how we do this, ladies and gentlemen. We link up with these folks afterwards, and we make sure that we hook them up with posters for coming through, custom posters. So we want to thank you again. We definitely look forward to seeing you in the World Series this year. We calling it right now.
I'll be there. Yeah.
Got to, man. We looking too good right now. We got to, man.
And baseball, baby.
And I got to give a shout out to my guy, WeHawks TV, my man D. He actually shows up. He actually does a podcast for the Atlanta Hawks. He's a Falcons and Braves fan as well. He's also he's prior military. He does a podcast or whatnot. So he actually would like, and I can put it this way: if you ever get time in your schedule, because you do cover the Hawks or whatnot, and they're very good at their content, would you mind doing us a solid and just stepping in there and saying what's up to those guys for us? Because they talked about the draft, they cover summer league, they do so much in that podcast, and they support us over here just like we support them. So we definitely would love to have you to go over there and maybe do a show with those guys or whatnot and give them some insight on the Hawks that you might know.
Absolutely. Happy to do it.
And I got you, Damon. See, you've been talking about, hey man, you gonna throw me a bone? I just threw you a bone, so I got you covered, fam. But we're BirdCage family. Everybody that's in here, from people that's behind the stage and everybody that contributes to this, we're gonna be at the Braves game on Saturday against the White Sox. So if you're there, we definitely will be in the margarita section.
I'm gonna be on the field, so y'all hit me up. I'll be there.
That you know what? We love to get a group picture with you too, because we definitely are gonna be in the building on Saturday.
Happy to do it, guys.
All right. So we do want to thank Mr. Myles Garrett for coming through, a future Atlanta legend in the sports game. Mr. Chuck Dowdy, Mr. Bob Neal, Terrence Moore. Hey, this man is getting ready to fill your shoes. Go ahead and dub him. The man got it. Dub him, please. Just dub him. But we really are appreciative of you coming through, and we definitely look forward to having you to come through again or whatnot during the season, so you can break it down for us.
Excited to do it, guys. It's gonna be a fun year.
Most definitely. So with that said, we're gonna go ahead and conclude it. We're gonna see you guys next Thursday. You already know how we get down. I gotta say thank you to all my panel who came through tonight. Scoop, Graybeard, and shout out to my man Killian K. Worthy. He was holding it down in YouTube right along with Coach Grant and my man Wangman Auto Garage, better known as Turbo Run It Back. Y'all got to check my man Turbo out. He's gonna have the lifeline of Turbo for you guys that can't get Falcons games because we're not going to be prime. He's going to be streaming them. So, y'all bless him and look out for him during the season. My name is Ryan Walker, better known as the Historian. We'll see you next week. You already know how we get down, man. BirdCage, it's official. We out.